Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. This time out, a new tube-driven Tubescreamer from Ibanez. Let's get started. Today we're checking out a brand new version of the venerable Tubescreamer from Ibanez. Now this version is called the NTS Nu Tubescreamer because it features Nutube technology. The Nutube was introduced in 2016 by Korg and it was used in their MV line of amplifiers. The Nutube is basically a vacuum fluorescent display that functions as a vacuum tube, but it has some big advantages over a traditional vacuum tube. For example, a traditional 12AX7 vacuum tube, like you might find in a pedal, uses about 100 volts of power, requires 2 watts. And it'll last for an extended period of time, but certainly not forever. It's also a larger size format, so you have to have a larger enclosure to hold it. With something like the Nutube, we can operate off a 9-volt battery. It requires very little current, and it'll actually last up to 30,000 hours of usage time. The Nutube is also significantly smaller than a traditional vacuum tube, so it'll fit into a standard size pedal enclosure. Today I have a traditional TS808 Tubescreamer here. Now that uses diode clipping, and that's the green box we have here. It's the one you've heard thousands of times on recordings with everybody from Stevie Ray Vaughan to just about an endless list of other players. It's used both as an overdrive box, as well as a boost for hitting the front end of your amplifier harder. Two characteristics of the Tubescreamer really help it stand out. First of all, it has an upper mid-range peak that really helps it cut through a dense mix. The other thing is, as I mentioned, the Tubescreamer uses diode clipping, but in fact we're blending about 50-50 of the clean tone along with that distorted tone to create that characteristic sound. The NTS generates its sound in very much the same way. We're clipping the sound using the tube, however, instead of using diodes. So it gives us a different characteristic, a different feel. It's actually a little bit less compressed feeling to my ears anyway, although you can drive it into tube distortion and tube compression. It feels more dynamic to me and it's a little bigger sounding, and we'll compare the two in just a second. In the case of the NTS, we actually have a control that allows us to range from totally clean, so you can use it as purely a clean boost, all the way over to 100% distortion. When you set that control to about 50%, we're in traditional Tubescreamer land. And again, we'll check that out in just a second. The NTS can operate either off of a 9-volt battery, or you can connect it to an external power supply at either 9 volts or 18 volts, and we'll compare the two of those later. 18 volts give you significantly more headroom and more output. Today I'm playing a Gibson Memphis ES335. This happens to be a Larry Carlton signature model, and it has 57 classics, which are basically PAFs. We're playing through a 57 twin reissue from Fender, which is a nice clean amp. Here's our clean tone. So it's a clean sound, but when I hit the guitar really hard, we're just getting to the very edge of breakup, and that's a great place to live when you want to use something like a Tubescreamer to really fatten up your sound. Let's compare the sound of a standard TS808 Tubescreamer along with our Nutube Tubescreamer. Here's our clean tone once again. Now here's our TS808. We have that traditional Tubescreamer tone. We're tightening up the bottom end, which is what makes this pedal so great for front-ending a heavy amp. And we have that upper mid-range as well that's giving us additional cut. We've got just a nice breakup because we're blending in our clean tone there along with the overdrive. Now here's the Nutube. We've got fatter bottom end, a little bit more what I would call bite on the top end, and I think a little less pronounced upper mid-range peak to it. It's a smoother sound, but it's more dynamic, a little less compressed sounding to my ears. Both are great tones, but there are definitely differences between them. Let's listen a bit more. First up, here's our Nutube Tubescreamer. And now our TS808. One thing I want to point out is that our level control, the output control from the new Tubescreamer, is actually lower than it is on the original to achieve the same volume level. We've got more output coming from this even at 9 volts. Speaking of, we have 4 controls on the new Tubescreamer: drive, tone, and level as you'd find on a traditional tube screamer, but the addition is this blend control here, or mix control, and that allows us to go from completely clean or dry tone all the way to our overdriven tone. If we turn the mix control all the way to the right, we get our pure clean tone. So here's our clean sound with the pedal disengaged or bypassed. Now we'll engage the pedal with the tone control turned all the way to the right. You'll notice that despite giving us a totally clean tone, we're actually getting a volume boost out of this. So this makes this pedal great as a clean boost option into your amplifier. When we turn the mix control all the way to the other direction, we get just the overdriven tone. There's no clean sound mixed in. And right in the middle is where we have the traditional tube screamer blend of clean and overdrive. The addition of the clean sound mixed in along with the overdrive tone gives us better articulation, a cleaner pick attack, and more dynamic response. One more thing to check out, and that's the new tube screamer operating at 18 volts. I'm going to change things over on my power supply and we'll listen. First of all, for reference, here we are at 9-volt operation. And now here we are at 18 volts. Moving to 18 volts gives us significantly more output and more clean headroom as well. The sound's tighter, it's more dynamic, and it's less fizzy on top. It's a really nice tone. Now again, when we compare that to the original TS-808, it's a very different sound. I hope you've enjoyed this look at the new tube version of the Tube Screamer. I think Ibanez has a definite winner here. That tube response, the dynamics you get, the different type of compression compared to diodes clipping, the ability to change the blend on the clean and the overdrive signal, all these are great features that allow you to really dial in exactly the tone and exactly the feel you want from your guitar. Thanks for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. Be sure to tune in next time. We'll have more guitars, more amps, more effects, and we'll be making lots of music. I'm Mitch Gallagher.
Wow.